Hello, bonjour, buenos dias. Bienvenue. Moi, je m'appelle Trisha Wind et je suis chef de programme Partage des connaissances.
My name is Trisha Wind. I'm the head of the GPE. Welcome to this webinar regarding the Call on Knowledge and Innovation that was launched on March 21. It's about asking for notes, and it is called for concept. It's going to address the fragile and vulnerable and violence-affected context. Here is the agenda today. I'm going to introduce IGRC and GPE KIX, and then my colleague Patrick Olagombe, who is the KIX program administrator, will also give you the question of research and call for notes. And then Sangai Rancho, who is the main administrator of the program, will review all the grants and all the organizations that can submit some notes on concept notes and what we expect from these notes. And then we'll continue answering your questions that we received on the emails, and then we'll have some time for Q&As that you can ask live during this webinar. And we are going to reply to as many as possible. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais vous donner.
This webinar is being recorded and will be posted online, but only the presenters will be visible and named in the recording. At the top of the webcast player, you'll see a set of navigation buttons. If you lose connectivity, you can click on the refresh icon, which is the two arrows in a circle. If you would like to follow along with the closed captioning, please click on the captions button, which looks like a dialog bubble. When it's time for the live question and answer, click on the chat icon, which is a person with their hand raised, to submit your question. Please know you can submit a question in English, French, or Spanish. If you need technical assistance, click on the question mark icon, and our provider's help desk will do their best to resolve your issue. If you want to change the language that you're listening in, the video quality, or any other preference, please click on the settings icon, which looks like a gear. All right, let's go to the next slide. So, je commencerai par présenter le CRDI. Le CRDI,
I'm going to introduce the IGRC that is in charge of the government. It's financing research in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Latin America on many different subjects. It's about culture, about climate change, and social policies led by governments, and also, of course, education. And briefly speaking, talking about KIX, KIX is a common initiative of the GPE in English and the IGRC. It's about sharing knowledge and innovation for the education for 80 partner countries of the GPE, and the target of KIX is one of GPE, and to support all the partnering countries to use the probing data in terms of innovation that they needed to speed up the access and the outcomes of learning and gender equity through equitable and inclusive and resilient education systems. And KIX is made of 3 parts that are interconnected, and they are shown there. Okay, at the top, here is the sharing of innovation. We have 4 different clusters working in educational systems to learning and to share. And the research is made to be useful for these educational systems. Of course, when the research is ready, it can be shared through these clusters. And these hubs can identify the needs in terms of support to the countries. It can bring the data and evidence that we need in terms of special education programs. Next slide, please. So this call for project is open to all FCV situations in the member countries of the GPE. These partner countries are listed here on the map and also in Appendix B on the call for notes document.
To explain the theme, the questions, and the objectives of this call. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Trish. And hi, everyone. I will briefly discuss the challenge for this call. I remind you again that the details are in the call document, which you already have access to. This is the 5th GPE KIX call in the last year. As you have already observed, this call is focused on education challenges in emergency, fragile, conflict, and violence-affected contexts. In this call, the emergencies include those induced by epidemics, climate change, and other natural disasters, as well as those in the context of fragility, conflict, and violence. The rationale behind this call builds on the evidence that sudden and sometimes protracted challenges can layer on top of existing education inequalities. Next slide. The next slide after that. This call is for addressing two interrelated sub-themes requiring applied research that involves addressing technical issues, capacity strengthening, effective governance, and sustainability. The first sub-theme is on access or re-entry for out-of-school children and retention of all of those that are at risk. The areas of research interest for this sub-theme include policies and programs that support re-enrollment and retention, disaster risk reduction strategies, policies and plans, integrating social, emotional learning in policy and practice. And the second sub-theme focuses on teacher training and support for work with out-of-school and at-risk children. The areas of research interest for this sub-theme are teacher development and support, such as scaling and sustaining effective teacher professional development, making teacher professional development policy more inclusive, and supporting the well-being of teachers. Next slide. On this slide, you can see the research questions that guide this call. The overall question focuses on how we can scale the impact of innovative approaches that address children's access to and retention of education in emergencies and fragile, conflict, and violence-affected contexts. The specific questions include, number one, what are the promising or proven innovations that address the challenges of access and retention in education in emergency, fragile, and conflict-affected contexts? The second one focuses on how can these innovations be adapted, how they can be scaled, implemented effectively, equitably, and sustainably. And the third question focuses on what factors enable, incentivize, or impede the scaling of these innovations. So we expect proposals to adapt these questions to the context or countries that you focus on. Next slide. This call's overall objective can be seen here on this slide. They include, number one, to generate evidence about how to scale the impact of promising or proven innovative approaches to address challenges of access and retention in education in emergency, fragile, and conflict-affected contexts. The second objective focuses on strengthening the capacities of relevant stakeholders to use that knowledge and innovation. And the third one focuses on mobilizing the evidence, developed to improve policy practice in education systems, supporting gender equality, equity, and inclusion. So there are three important things to note there. One, generating knowledge. 2, strengthening capacities to use that knowledge and innovation, and 3, mobilizing the evidence to improve policy and practice. Remember that these objectives should be adapted into the concept notice specific objectives, and also keep in mind that within KIX, we not only produce knowledge, but also we want to use it. So the next section of this webinar is about the type of grants and who can apply and what we are looking for in the proposals. Over to you, Trish.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick. So yeah, moving on to what we're looking for in this call, all of what we are going to cover in the next couple of slides is in the detailed call document that is available online. So we urge you to take a good look at that document. And since many of the questions that we have received already have to do with eligibility, we'll start with the general eligibility criteria of who can submit a concept note. So concept notes may be submitted by individual organizations or by a consortia of up to 3 organizations that will work together. These kinds of organizations might include research institutions, universities, think tanks, networks, associations, civil society or NGOs, nonprofits, or the private sector. Proposals that include or are from the private sector partners should demonstrate how private sector resources, whether that be financial or technical know-how, will contribute to the project. The organizations must be registered or incorporated either nationally or internationally. They must have an independent legal status or what's called a legal personality. They must be capable of contracting in their own right and name, receiving and administering funds, and have the authority to direct the proposed project activities. For this call, the organizations that may apply as leads or as consortia leads must be based in a low or middle income country. Applicants should have a strong presence and a track record of work in the education sector of the GPE partner countries they intend to work in. We would advise that you ask the person in your organization who's responsible for legal, administrative, or financial matters to read the call document and maybe go into some of the links that are in there about the kind of grant agreement that would be offered. And please make sure that you can comply with the requirements that are in there and that you'll be able to take on the kind of grant that we would offer. In terms of who is not eligible, this call is not to fund individual researchers just by themselves. They need to be in organizations. This call is not open to government ministries or agencies, nor are they open for the for-profit providers of core education services. Next slide, and over to my colleague Sanjay.
Greetings, everyone. So concept notes may be of the following 2 types. Single country targeting impact in a single country, tailored to specific national needs, includes connection with ministries of education or other actors who can use the research in that country, with a funding between 3 to 500 Canadian dollars. And these should be led by organizations based in the country of focus. They may apply as individual organizations or lead a consortium that includes other organizations from within or outside the country. Multi-country grants targeting impact in 3 or more countries with direct relevance to specific priorities in those countries for a grant of anywhere between 800,000 to 1 million Canadian dollars should be submitted by an organization based in a low and middle income country. Other consortium members may include organizations from within or outside the region. Multi-country grants are preferred. Single country grants will be considered where multi-country work is difficult and or when there is a compelling and unique opportunity for learning from a single country case. Next slide, and over to you, Trish.
Thank you. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on this slide talking about what are we expecting of the projects that we will end up funding. The first is that it is very important to us at GPE KIX that the research we fund is relevant and important for education systems. So concept notes should demonstrate how they link to education system priorities. They must have clear plans on how they would engage with key stakeholders that include but are not limited to people in ministries of education. They should demonstrate their clear alignment with official documents, maybe things like an education sector plan, a partnership compact, or other strategy documents. We'll be looking for evidence that the applicants are working in the country or countries and that they have relationships with key actors. Second, funded projects will be expected to undertake research for development, which, when Patrick laid out the objectives for this call, this is what we mean. They're designed to build evidence, to strengthen capacity, and help support the mobilization of that evidence for policy and practice. They should be problem-focused and action-oriented. They would be expected to meet the quality standards that IDRC expresses in its Research Quality Plus framework, and a link to that is provided in the call document. Research Quality Plus style research is methodologically robust. It's relevant and important. It's ethical. It incorporates local knowledge. It promotes gender equality, equity, and inclusion, and it is positioned to be used. Third, concept notes are expected to focus on existing, promising, or proven innovative approaches that have the potential to be scaled and facilitate important improvement in GPE partner countries. So what do we mean by innovation? Innovation could be practices, it could be policies, programs, technologies, approaches, methodologies, platforms, or other interventions. And it may be the combination of some of those things that are the innovation. So we're looking for innovative approaches that address the challenges faced in the education systems. Applicants should focus on contextually relevant and culturally appropriate innovation that is feasible, cost-effective, and scalable. Proposals should present evidence on what they know about the efficacy of the approaches. The innovations that are the focus here could be developed within or outside the national context in which the research would take place. They're expected to focus on promising or proven approaches that could scale in GPE partner countries or that are already en route to being scaled. Now, that turns us to scaling research. We want to make sure that scaling is actually part of the research questions that you are looking at. This kind of research can include adapting the innovations to the contextual needs of the countries, developing or testing means and modes of scaling, like how do they actually scale? Is it a policy approach? Is it a capacity approach? What are the ways in which this can scale and how can we build evidence about that? Projects can support capacity strengthening of stakeholders who would adapt, adopt, and be involved in that scaling journey. They might conduct cost analysis. A super important aspect of any scaling question is what does this actually cost and what would it cost to scale? And assessing results. We hope that concept notes would take a critical approach to scaling because bigger is not always better. Scaling impact is meant to be a process of improving the reach, breadth, quality, equity, and sustainability of the changes, benefits, and solutions that innovation can bring to education. So in the call document, you can find links to resources that elaborate on this. And I'm going to ask my colleague to put a link in the chat for this webinar to a couple of recent resources that you might find useful about scaling or research about and for scaling and questions of equity in scaling. So we'll also include that in the FAQ document that we will update following this webinar. Fourth, promoting gender equality, equity, and inclusion are core to the research objectives for this call. Concept notes should integrate gender equality, equity, and inclusion in a whole bunch of places, and this is all listed in the call document as well and in an annex that we included. Think about GEI, gender equality, equity, and inclusion, in the expertise of the project team, in the problem identification, in the research purpose and intended results, in the research questions, design and methodology, and in the knowledge mobilization strategy. Please know that gender-blind projects will not be considered. You can find additional guidance on integrating GEI in research proposals and in the implementation of projects in that annex in the call document. And finally, I won't speak too much about this, but projects funded out of this call will become part of the broader work and opportunities of the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, with an emphasis on learning and knowledge mobilization. We're going to go to the next slide here on what are we looking for in the concept note. We'll be looking for concept notes that directly address the challenges outlined in the call and speak to the priorities of the chosen GPE partner countries. They need to present a convincing strategy of how they will address those. And that's all in the relevance and likelihood of impact category, which will receive 35% of the weighting as we assess concept notes. We will address important research questions with a convincing strategy and a feasible design and methodology with clear strategies to integrate gender equality, equity, and inclusion, capacity strengthening, knowledge mobilization, scaling impact, and supporting uptake. That is all covered under the design and methodology, which will receive 40% of the weight. The third category of criteria is that the applicant or project team should demonstrate a strong track record that is suitable to the task proposed and have the required capacity in education systems and gender equality, equity, and inclusion, knowledge mobilization, and applied research. And they need to have a clear strategy for how they will coordinate as a team with fair and equitable partnerships. So that is all covered under organizational capacity and is worth 20% of the assessment. And finally, the scale and the scope of proposed activities and outcomes and the potential uptake of results justifies the proposed budget. And that's what we'll be looking for in the value for money, which gets 5% of the assessment. The detailed call document includes a lot of information about the format and requirements of the concept notes. The concept notes are fairly brief, so we would advise that you leave time to edit your concept note when you're done, so each section is clear and succinct and addresses all the aspects that we'll be looking for. Sanjay, onto the review and selection process.
Thank you. So here's an overview of the review and selection process. Concept notes are due on April 25th, 2024, before midnight Eastern Standard Time. By May 30th, 2024, shortlisted applicants will be invited to submit a full proposal that elaborates on the concept note. IDRC will share comments to guide the development of the proposals, as well as the evaluation criteria by which they will be assessed. Proposals will be longer and more detailed, with additional sections on research ethics, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and will have to provide further evidence of planned stakeholder engagement in the proposed project. They will include a detailed budget and a work plan. Shortlisted applicants will be required to submit their detailed proposals using the online application form by July 11, 2024. Submitted proposals will be reviewed for completeness by IDRC, followed by an external review by an independent assessment panel. IDRC will inform all applicants the outcome of their application by end of August 2024. Next slide, and back to you, Trish.
So indeed, the presentation so far addresses some of the questions some of the questions that we have received from email, but now we're going to go into some of the more specific questions. Note that some of the questions that we get are very specific about someone's organization, and we can't reply to every individual query because we get hundreds of emails. So rather, we're presenting some of the broad questions in a generalized version so that perhaps they would be useful to more than just the applicant who submitted it. So if we go to slide 15, this is about consortia. So as a reminder, concept notes can be submitted by either individual organizations or by a consortia of up to 3 organizations that work together. So in terms of consortia, what are we looking for in a consortia? Basically, the consortia should cover the expertise required to develop and implement a research for development project. They need to be able to work in each of the countries of focus and have all of the expertise and knowledge and connections that it would take to succeed. What are the requirements of the lead organization? Well, there are the specific eligibility that Sanjay already covered in terms of single country grants versus multi-country grants. But in total, we are looking for individual organizations or the leads of consortia who can manage a large-scale grant from a financial and operational point of view. We're looking for presence in the field. We're looking for thematic expertise in the subject of the proposal. We're looking for an ability to coordinate the members of the consortia. They must be able to participate in the knowledge exchange across other KIX-funded projects, and they need to be that independent, legally incorporated entity capable of contracting in their own right and name. So the lead organization signs the legal grant agreement with IDRC and then subcontracts or sub-grants to the other members. Only in exceptional circumstances would IDRC consider issuing a separate grant agreement with a consortia partner outside the lead. What are the roles and responsibilities of co-applicant organizations? Well, that would depend on the structure and the nature of the concept note and the work to be proposed. But basically, co-applicants should demonstrate a robust presence and proven track record in the work connected to the education sectors of GPE partner countries. Co-applicants assume responsibility for specific aspects of the work, and they report their progress back to the lead organization. It's crucial to note that the lead organization bears the ultimate responsibility for reporting on all financial and technical matters related to the work. And then we have a question of, would it be possible that the up to 3 organizations in a consortia also have additional partners? And yes, for sure, that might be possible. You might want to include other kinds of partners in your plans. Depending on your focus, you might want to involve teachers' associations, maybe relevant NGOs, people with specific research expertise. You should think about who the stakeholders are that are relevant to your project's objectives and how best to engage with them. Slide 16.
Right, so we have a number of questions on eligibility, and here are the first 3. The first one is, can private sector organizations apply? And the answer is yes, except for profit providers of core education services, such as large chain private schools. Private sector organizations can apply. Concept notes that include private sector actors should demonstrate how private sector resources, for example, financial or technical know-how, will contribute to the project. Please explain this in the budget notes section of the concept note. The detailed budget requested for the full proposal in stage 2 of this call will include a specific place to indicate private sector resources. And the second question is, can ministries of education be consortium partners? And the answer is no. Ministries of education cannot be consortium partners because the majority of GPE funding goes to ministries of education through a separate funding mechanism. KIX is a complementary mechanism within GPE with funding targeting other actors. Applicants are encouraged to involve national and local governments as strategic partners in their projects, though. Scaling in education systems will most likely need connections with governments. The bottom line, however, is that ministries cannot receive funding through KIX grants. And the third question is, can current KIX, GP, or Education Out Loud grantees apply? And the answer is yes, they can apply. Next slide, and over to you, Trish.
Great, thanks. We have a couple more questions around eligibility. Can LMIC, or so low and middle income country-based organizations who lead single and multi-country projects involve researchers who are based elsewhere? And the answer is yes. And then second, are organizations that are based in a low and middle income country that is not a GPE partner country, are they eligible to lead an application for a multi-country project? And the answer is also yes. Sanjay, over to you on eligibility.
So this is the final question on eligibility. Can national offices of international organizations lead applications for single and multi-country grants? So grants for this call are to be led by low and middle income country-based organizations. In a global context where the majority of research funding goes to the universities and organizations in high-income countries, to international NGOs or multilateral organizations, KIX is prioritizing funding to organizations in the global south in this call. That is to say, African organizations, Latin American and Caribbean organizations, and organizations in low and middle income countries in Asia and the Pacific, the Caucasus, etc. Many international organizations, NGOs and others, having national or regional offices have submitted questions about whether their national or regional offices can apply. Please first consider the intent. We wish to fund organizations based in low and middle income countries. Then consider the details. If the grant agreement would be managed through a head office in Europe, North America, or other high-income country elsewhere, then those national or regional offices are not eligible to lead a concept note for this call. Next slide, and over to you, Trish.
Great. So this has a couple of questions about the location of the research. Multi-country projects must include grounded work in at least 3 countries. And so the question came, can this include both GPE partner countries and non-GPE partner countries? And the answer is no. KIX is a mechanism of GPE, and its work is only in GPE partner countries. How can an organization demonstrate that it has relationships with relevant education stakeholders in the target countries? So I was thinking about that question and thought, well, your past work might demonstrate this, and you could talk about that in terms of the team capacities. You can talk about the current ways that you engage and support education system actors. Maybe your organization has a memorandum of understanding with a particular sector or with the ministry. Maybe you regularly participate in policy dialogues or the local education group. Maybe you're involved in the specific areas that your proposal focuses on. So think about the ways that you can demonstrate your ongoing connections and how you'll be able to position this new work for use.
So we have these questions on the type of research. Is there a preferred methodology for the projects to be funded through this call? We received many questions on acceptable types of approaches and methodologies for this call, such as baseline studies, large-scale assessments, or policy implementation, for example. We have no preferred methodology, but the selected methodologies must be appropriate to answer the research questions and achieve all the overall call objectives and project objectives in their context. Proposals must be explicit and elaborate on the justification of their methodological choices. Many of our projects tend to use mixed methods and involve a lot of collaboration with education stakeholders, sometimes even co-creation with those stakeholders. Especially in this call, which focuses on innovation for contexts of emergencies, fragility, and conflict, please consider issues of feasibility and adaptability of doing research for such contexts. Second question, can projects build on previously funded KIX applied research? And the answer is yes, proposals can be built on previously funded KIX applied research. Over to you, Trish.
Great, thanks, Sanjay. So in terms of the proposal submission details, we got a question about how do I submit a concept note? Is it only online? The answer is yes, it's only online. There is a landing page on IDRC's website about this call. From there, there is a link to the detailed call document, to the frequently asked questions or FAQ page, and you'll also find a button at the bottom that says apply online. So if you click there, that will take you to the online application form. Slide 22, funding and administration. So we've received a number of questions about scaling research, and the call explains that it will not finance the implementation of the approaches. And so we have questions about what do we mean by that? Are the costs of scaling or adapting or replicating excluded? So the research that we fund is intended to build on things that are already working and position research to build and mobilize knowledge about how to scale the impact. So when we say we're not going to finance the implementation, it's because the cost of actually financing at scale is beyond any individual research project. So that is to say, the financing we're offering is not to implement the innovative approach, it's about the research about it and for it. Question was, considering that operating costs can be higher in fragile or conflict-affected countries, can the proposed budgets go beyond the ceiling amounts The answer is no. The ceiling amounts are set for the two different types of projects that we would fund through this call. And what are the indirect costs and what percentage of the budget can they represent? Indirect project costs consist of administrative costs not directly related to the research. So that could include, for instance, salaries and benefits of personnel which support and administer the project, maybe office supplies, telecommunications costs or computer equipment for administration or accounting. IDRC grants would cover up to 13% of this as administrative indirect costs that can be managed by the recipient. So please note that the 13% does not include the actual indirect costs. At this concept note stage, there was a question about the matched funds. So at this concept notes phase, we were just asking for a summary budget and an explanation about why the amount of funding requested is required for the proposed research. If you have matched funding, please feel free to explain that in the text. And for those who are invited to submit a full proposal in the second phase, they will be asked to provide a much more detailed budget in which they're also asked about the matched funding. The detailed budget provides space for that. Over to you, Sanjay.
So here are two questions on areas of focus. Does the call cover all levels of education from pre-primary to tertiary? The answer is KIX focuses on early childhood to secondary education and teacher training. We do not focus on a specific age range, and we recognize the complexities of education timelines in the context that this call focuses on. Second question is, should projects cover all sub-themes, or is it possible to select just one? Proposals can cover one or more sub-themes as relevant to the context of the project. Next slide, please. So on the number of proposals, can an organization submit more than one application to this call for concept notes? And the answer is yes. Organizations may submit up to 2 concept notes as an individual organization, or as the lead of a consortia. Back to you, Trish. Next slide.
Thank you. So with that, we have covered a lot of the themes of the questions that we had received up until now by email ahead of this webinar. So now is the time that we can turn to any remaining questions that you might have, and we will answer as many as we can during the time that we have. So once again, in order to submit a question, click that button at the top of the webcast player with a little person with their hand raised. You'll be asked to enter your name, and in the space provided, please enter your question in either English, French, or Spanish, and then press send. Note that your questions will not be visible to everybody else on the webinar, but we can see them, and my colleagues are doing their best to combine them if they're overlapping, to answer them and send them back to Sanjay and me, and we will try our best to answer as many as we can. We have colleagues, of course, in the background who are doing this, and if there are some pauses because they're working to collect these questions and send them to us online, that can sometimes involve a couple of pauses. So we're still here. Please just be patient and we'll do our very best. So already some of the questions are coming in. And the first question is about the research focus. Can the research focus on refugee or displaced populations from GPE partner countries who are not now in GPE partner countries? So it's true that this call definitely could be funding work about displaced populations. However, we have to focus on GPE partner countries. So while the education for displaced populations, including refugees, is a focus of the call, the research needs to focus for use in GPE partner countries. So it should be focused on populations in GPE partner countries. Sanjay, I think you are the next.
Sorry, my Teams is acting up. So sure. The next question is, does KIX work with only a specified age range? And the answer, as I also stated before, is that no. KIX focuses on basic education, meaning pre-primary to secondary education, plus teacher training. We do not specify age ranges for pre-primary to secondary education, noting that in context of emergencies, fragility, and conflict, there may be quite a few so-called overage learners.
Okay, so we got a question about, are organizations from eligible GPE partner countries, for example, Jordan, able to submit a concept note for this call, or do they have to be full partner countries of GPE? So organizations from eligible partner countries may not apply to for funding to conduct research in their own countries. However, they may apply for funding to do research in GPE partner countries that are listed in the call document. So for instance, Jordan is considered eligible GPE partner country. Given this, we wouldn't fund projects based in Jordan at the moment, but organizations from Jordan could apply and conduct research that focuses on GPE partner countries mentioned in the call.
So the next question is, can NGOs in countries not based in GPE partner countries apply as part of the consortium? The answer is NGOs not based in GPE partner countries can apply. However, two things to keep in mind. They can be the lead organization only if they are based in a low or middle income country. If they are based in a high income country, they may be part of the consortium, but not lead the organization. Sorry, not lead the consortium.
Mm-hmm. So when you say government ministries or agencies are not eligible, what about agencies that operate at arm's length from government? So that's one of the questions that we got. So any government agency is not eligible for funding. The lead organization must be based in a low-income country listed in Annex B, and other consortium members could include members from within the region, national, regional, or international offices of any other kinds of organizations.
So another question is, in the webinar, 5 expectations of projects are listed. Is it a must to include all in the concept note? And the answer is yes. It is important that concept notes address all the 5 expectations listed in the webinar and in the call document.
Okay, so I'm seeing that we are continuing to get a lot of questions about eligibility. So here's another one. The question came in, my organization is an international NGO with headquarters in a high-income country, but incorporated and based in a low or middle-income country. Are we eligible for the single country category? Okay, so again, I would urge you to go back to both the intent and then the details. So the intent is that we wish to fund organizations that are based in low and middle-income countries through this call. If you are an international NGO with a headquarters in a high-income country and its headquarters that would sign the grant agreement, then they are not eligible. If national or regional offices are independently registered, financially and administratively independent of the head office in a country of the call, it is possible that they would be considered eligible. But please first keep in mind the intent and then look at the details. The details in the call document talk about what we're looking for in terms of an independently, legally incorporated entity that is independent. Go ahead, Sanjay, in the next question.
So the next question is, if we are working as a consortia across 3 countries, can we have funding directly sent to separate accounts of our partners from different countries? Or will the funds be transferred into the lead organization's account only? And the answer is, the lead organization will be responsible for the project fund management, and the funds will be transferred directly to the lead institution bank account. The lead organization may enter into sub-grant arrangements with the partners who can then be responsible for portions of the work, reporting back to the lead. But ultimately, the lead organization is responsible for reporting on all financial and technical matters related to the project.
All right. So we have 2 questions now in French. Est-ce qu'une institution de recherche universitaire
is a research and academic institution eligible? The answer is yes, it is possible. Absolutely. Another question in French. When it's a multi-country project, is it necessary to have organizations based in each of the countries? The answer is no, it's not compulsory. You don't have to have an organization in each of the countries. Nevertheless, we would like you to include organizations or national or regional researchers at each country's level, and that is going to reinforce the capacities and have enhanced impact and results at the national level. But it's not an obligation. Sangay, over to you.
So another question is, can training institutions or universities funded by national or subnational governments in Africa apply? Yes, training institutions and universities funded by the government may apply to this call. We do not consider them as government agencies.
Are regional economic communities eligible to apply? Sure, yes. Intergovernmental regional institutions are eligible so long as they are based and registered in a low or middle income country.
So in the light of the call's expectations that funded projects mobilize ministries of education and other government stakeholders, what advice do you have for the projects that are working in countries where the local fragility and conflict have created a lack of efficacy within the government bodies that might otherwise be involved? We encourage all projects to conduct a stakeholder mapping at the start of their activities and use the results of it to determine who are the most appropriate stakeholders to work with to achieve the project results. Also, we encourage you to think about knowledge mobilization approaches that are most appropriate to the context within that country.
Another question is about a clarification on the budget. Is the budget template for the concept note the same as the proposed budget template? No, the budget template is different from the proposal template, and you can find the budget template if you're interested on the IDRC website or in the online application platform. So at the concept note stage, we're just looking for a summary, but for those who are invited to submit a full proposal, you would be asked to submit a full budget.
Next question is, will this webinar be recorded and available on your website? And the answer is yes, it will be on the KIX YouTube channel and linked in the call landing page as well.
Question came in, would we consider a multi-country grant for 2 countries, not 3, if there is a strong justification? No. Multi-country grants target impact in 3 or more countries with direct relevance to specific priorities in those countries, and we're going to stick with 3.
So the next question is, if we have additional questions over the next few, oh, sorry, that's not a question. Would it still be possible to send in questions? And the answer is yes. You can send in questions.
Yeah, we'll do our best to monitor the email inbox, and if there are questions that come in that are relevant to a broad number of potential applicants, then we will answer and we will update the FAQ document as possible. So you mentioned, this is another question, you mentioned that research can involve developing and testing methods or models. Can you clarify what we mean? So the proposal could include testing models that have been tried in other contexts, but the call is not intended to direct implementation at scale of innovations. The call focuses on proven or promising innovations. So brand new things that have not been tested or implemented before in other contexts are not eligible.
So another question is, can a consortium led by an institution based in low and middle income country, but with a US-based partner apply? And the answer is yes. If the consortium is led by an organization based and registered in a low and middle income country, they can bring in consortium or partners from other institutions based, for instance, in the US or elsewhere.
Question comes in, my country's policies prevent us from transferring funds abroad. Can you suggest any alternatives? So in this case, the easiest approach is to work as a consortia and have an institution who is based in a where transferring funds is possible, that they should be the lead organization. So that is to say, if your country's policies prevent you from funds, then maybe apply in a consortia, but not as the lead organization.
Another question is, should we do empirical studies first on innovations, or can we use previous evidence for scaling? Well, we expect projects to work with promising or proven innovations, so there should already be some evidence of their effectiveness. In the process of the project, we expect you to generate more evidence on it, and depending on the focus of your study, you may be adapting the innovation to new context and testing its effectiveness, or you may be testing only the core elements of the innovation to see whether it still demonstrates the same results. Please note that we will not fund applications that do not present any evidence of the innovation's effectiveness. We will not seed any new innovations as part of this call.
Question came in, is there any contact person who can advise during the application stage? So if you have any questions still, you could send them to the email address kixcalls@idrc.ca. We're not able to answer all submitted questions, but we encourage you to keep checking the FAQ document.
So now the question is there a limit on the percentage funding for personnel or an expected proportion? Well, the percentage of personnel should not exceed 25% over the budget or the total budget of the project. If exceeded, a rationale must be provided.
The question came in, is there an official template for the concept note? Or can we only see what exactly is required when working in the online application? So you can see the things that will be you'll be required to answer in the online application in the call document, the detailed call document that we've been referring to. Please see the section about the concept note requirements in that detailed call document. So all information can be found there. And we highly encourage you to read that call document if you've not already done so. And then when you get to the online application form, it is a mirror of what you see in the detailed call document.
So now the question is, are two countries enough to submit a multi-country proposal, or is it a must to have at least 3 countries? We got this question a lot, so I think it's worth answering again. For multi-country grant applications, it has to be at least 3 or more partner countries, partner organizations. So.
Okay. In fragile contexts, banking systems are vulnerable to disruptions. Can a consortia partner receive the funding in the case that the national banking system collapses of the lead organization? Okay, so overall, we would expect that the lead organization has the financial capacity to manage the consortia funds. In the event the lead organization banking system collapses, then definitely we would discuss an alternative if that would happen.
So question came in, if a partnership or consortium is under development but won't be finalized before the concept note deadline, can it be indicated in the concept note but only formally presented as a consortium in the full proposal if that stage is reached? And the answer is yes, you can indicate in the concept note that the partnership is under development and the intention to finalize the partnership in the full proposal development stage. If possible, a letter indicating this may be useful during the evaluation.
This question also came in. So at this concept note stage, can we submit the full proposal? And the answer is no. We're only accepting concept notes at this stage. Maybe if I have a second, I'll just explain that right now, the online portal is all set up just to accept concept notes. We don't have the online portal set up yet for the full proposal. So only those applicants that are invited to submit a full proposal, they'll be notified, and then we'll have a separate online system set up for those full proposals. But thanks for thinking ahead. I think we may be coming to the end. We'll just wait for one more minute to see if a couple more questions are coming through. Otherwise, here we go. Sanjay, over to you.
Yes. So are there any successful cases of projects that can be a reference for applicants? The answer is you are welcome to explore the existing projects on our KIX website portal, which is gpkix.org. And you will see a description. And even in the library, all the outputs put in by the different KIX projects.
So the question is it permissible for an organization to be featured on multiple concept notes, assuming different roles? For example, leading a consortia in one concept note and providing technical support in another? Yes, it's acceptable for an institution to submit more than one concept note and be involved in different roles in each proposed project. However, note that the organizations may only submit up to 2 concept notes as either an individual organization or as the lead of the consortia. Oh, this one's in French, so I'll take this one too. Comment une nouvelle organisation n'a pas encore...
How should an organization that doesn't have experiences, how could they prove their management capacity? The management capacity takes into consideration the experience, the team, the CVs, and the different components of the consortium. There's one more French question. In case of consortium, should all parties have the same legal status? No, the members of the consortium then have national, regional, or international officers of international organizations or NGOs or other organizations outside of the region.
Can a university with many campuses submit more than one application? So institutions can submit more than one application, including universities, independently of the number of campuses they have. Those applications will be assessed separately.
So the next question is, what type of knowledge products do you expect out of these projects? And the answer is each project is expected to develop a knowledge mobilization strategy and outline the outputs they will develop as part of the strategy. The outputs need to be created with knowledge users in mind. Given this, they may vary. Research outputs could include peer-reviewed articles, books or book chapters. For other knowledge users, outputs might include scaling strategies, evaluation reports of baseline, midline, and endline studies, adaptation or contextualization strategies, training materials, toolkits, open courses, policy briefs, videos, podcasts, amongst others.
Okay, so this is the last question that we're going to be able to cover because our time is almost up. The question is, will the fund, or the project, I guess, cover the expenses of the research only, or can it fund the expenses of the implementation of the idea? For example, teaching aids, hall rentals for trainings, rehabilitation of classes, establishments of computer labs. I think rather than trying to guess all the individual possibilities here, the best thing to do is for a list of eligible expenses, please refer to the IDRC guidelines for acceptable project expenditures. And there is a link on our website that is exactly that, guidelines for acceptable project expenditures. And you can take a look there. So with that, we have come to the end of our hour. And I'm going to ask our webcast colleagues to please put up the second last slide with the key dates. As I mentioned before, we will update the frequently asked questions document following this webinar, and as we can in the following weeks. If you've submitted a question today that is broadly relevant to others and we haven't been able to get to it, then we will add it to the FAQ document. So we thank you very much for your interest in this call and in KIX and in this concept note. We really look forward to reading your submissions. We look forward to the key dates in front of us. So April 25, as Sanjay previously mentioned, is the deadline for submitting concept notes. They will be evaluated by IDRC program staff, and shortlisted applicants will be invited to submit a full proposal, and they will receive notice about that on May 30th. Those full proposals will be submitted by July 11. They will be sent off to an independent expert review panel, and proposals selected for funding will be informed on August 30th. So this is the end of our hour today. We again thank you very much and look forward to reading all your great ideas. Have a great day.